Today marks exactly 10 years since the Constitution of Kenya 2010 was promulgated. A decade on, Kenya has 47 county governments in place under the system of devolution, which is now 7 years into its implementation. There are 47 women representatives in parliament, but still, the two-thirds gender rule envisaged in the constitution is yet to be realized in most public institutions, including parliament. 10 years on, corruption in government remains undefeated, even as Kenya's economy grapples with numerous challenges ranging from high levels of public debt to the current coronavirus pandemic. This week, on Metropole Debrief, we review some of the key milestones that Kenya has achieved in the last 10 years under the new constitutional dispensation and whether the country's supreme law is due for any reforms. My name is Nduro Ganga. Hello there and welcome to the show.
I, Uhuru Kenyatta,
on the 9th of April 2013, President Uhuru Kenyatta made history as the first president of Kenya to be inaugurated under the Constitution of Kenya 2010. Nearly 8 years on, President Kenyatta reckons that the country's supreme law is now due for change.
10 years later, I am already discerning a constitutional moment. And I want to be clear, not a moment to replace the 2010 Constitution, but one to improve on it. A moment that will right what we didn't get correct in 2010. But fundamentally, the constitutional moment that I discern is one that will bring an end to the senseless cycles of violence that we have experienced in every election cycle since 1992. And one that will deepen our democratic credentials as a country and lead to a much more inclusive society.
That call was born out of the political strife that Kenya experienced during and shortly after the 2017 general elections. Although the tensions were somewhat resolved in the now famous handshake between President Uhuru Kenyatta and former Prime Minister Raila Odinga, the clamor for constitutional reform still remains, as espoused in the Building Bridges process that was initiated by the two leaders.
As I have already mentioned, he told us that a constitution is not an end in itself. It is a means to a greater end. It is a living document. And if certain elements of the Constitution outlive their historical purposes, they become a cancer. They must be removed, or they will infect the good elements of the mother law. And that is why, fellow Kenyans, we remove Section 2A that had been added to the Independence Constitution in the early 1980s. We removed this section in 1991 in order to create a multi-party system. Why? Because this Section 2A had outlived its historical purposes and it was morphing into a political cancer.
A referendum on the Constitution of Kenya before the next general elections in 2022 is now in sight, judging from the president's tone. Well, judging from the president's tone, a referendum might be coming this year or not, who knows. However, let's circle back to the 2010 Constitution and what it envisaged. On the 27th of August 2010, Kenya ushered in a new constitution to replace the 1963 independence-era constitution, which later morphed into the 1969 Constitution. The promulgation of the new constitution followed its approval in the referendum of 4th August 2010 by 67% of Kenyan voters. This coming 5 years after a similar process failed to yield a new constitution. Now, let's circle back 10 years ago and review the key reforms that were ushered in through the Constitution of Kenya 2010. Where do we begin? We begin with presidential powers. Now, under the Constitution of Kenya 2010, the president has no power anymore to appoint and dismiss state officers at will and can only do so with the approval of a majority in the National Assembly. Cabinet appointees must also come from outside of Parliament, unlike previously when cabinet ministers were also members of Parliament, further separating the legislature from the executive. And we've all seen this previously. Even President Uhuru Kenyatta was, President Mwai Kibaki was a member of Parliament, and now President Uhuru Kenyatta is not a member of Parliament. Presidential terms were set at 5 years and are not limited to a maximum of 2 terms. President Uhuru Kenyatta, the son of Kenya's first president, Jomo Kenyatta, has held the office since 2013 and is now on his 2nd and final term. Keyword, final. Let's move on to the legislature. Kenya's legislative arm now consists of 2 houses, unlike previously. Now we have the National Assembly and we have the Senate, more like the upper and the lower house. The National Assembly consists of 349 members, 290 members elected from a single member constituency, 47 women representatives elected from each of the counties, and 12 members nominated by political parties to represent the interests of the youth, persons with disabilities, and workers. Now, the Senate, on the other hand, has 67 members, of which 47 are elected from each of the county, and 16 are women members nominated by the parties. 2 represent young people, and another 2 represent people living with disabilities. Now, what is the role of the Senate? The Senate only has jurisdiction over bills that concern county government, whereas the National Assembly has authority over all other matters, including public spending and taxation. And that's why we are seeing the revenue allocation debate is still stuck at the Senate, because revenue allocation directly affects counties. And that's why Senate has the final say on the matter. Let's move on to another sector or another element of the new constitution that was reformed a little bit, the judiciary. Now, at the apex of the new system stands the Supreme Court, which consists of the Chief Justice, David Maraga, as its president, a Deputy Chief Justice, Philomena Mwilu, and 5 other judges of the Supreme Court. Now, this is where we saw the famous presidential election in 2017 get nullified. The Supreme Court is the final arbitrator in cases involving the constitutionality of statutes and the only body able to hear and determine disputes relating to presidential elections. Now, even in a recent interview, the Chief Justice said even if he was to be given those elections today, he would still nullify them, just to go and show how much the judiciary has power over matters concerning elections in this country, saying they were marred with irregularities that could not be turned a blind eye to. Now, to enhance the independence of the judiciary is the power of the Judicial Service Commission, which is chaired by the Chief Justice. The commission is tasked with promoting and facilitating the independence and accountability of the judiciary. Now, in order to promote efficient, effective, and transparent administration of justice, the Judicial Service Commission has the power to determine who is eligible to be a judge and to investigate judges accused of misconduct. Now, the last bit, a little bit wishy-washy, because we've seen judges being accused of misconduct, but not much has happened. Again, we're just 10 years into the Constitution. Maybe that could change. That's a big maybe. Then we move to bills of rights. Also enshrined in the Constitution is an expanded Bill of Rights that stipulates the country's rights and fundamentals of freedom. Among the rights that were included in the Bills of Rights is the freedom of the media, as well as economic and social rights, ranging from the rights to healthcare services and that of education. So this Bill of Rights just seeks to ensure that Kenyans live a dignified life in their own country. Healthcare, education, freedom of expression. Now, here comes the cherry on top of the cake, devolution. The Constitution of Kenya also fundamentally redefined the relationship between national governments and localities, initiating a process that saw the transfer of certain powers from national governments to the newly 47 created local counties, ranging from economic development to healthcare and infrastructure. The rationale for devolution involves several factors, but the two most important ones are empowerment of local governments, and reduction of inequality between regions. And this is a conversation we've seen even leaders have in the National Assembly and in Senate, them saying there are parts of this country that have seen tarmac roads, water, electricity at the onset of devolution. The national government is expected to share at least 15% of the revenue collected with counties which receive the individual share of revenue based on a formula that is now a very divisive formula proposed by the Commission on Revenue Allocation and approved by the Senate. Since the advent of devolution in 2013, counties have cumulatively received 1.889 trillion as the basic equal share of revenue from the national government. Now, these are some of the key highlights of what has changed since the promulgation of the new constitution of Kenya the year 2010. 10 years later, what progress has Kenya made and what does the scorecard look? After the break, we dive deep into the conversation on the Constitution of Kenya a decade on.